welcome to Tea with Julia, and you're seeing me today outside a new Eastbourne cafe called More Than Cake. Now, More Than Cake has replaced what used to be Plantation, and it's still got a bit of the old spirit of Plantation. Plantation had an interesting attitude towards cake. It was kind of artisan cake. It wasn't fluffy or flouncy. Their cakes were very simple but very, very good quality, very well made. And in many ways, More Than Cake is kind of continuing the heritage of Plantation. Now, this has got me thinking. I've been thinking a bit lately about venues and our relationship with venues, because I don't do a lot of nightlife these days, and in fact I never really did for a queen. I mean, queens usually are like big nightlife people. Oh, I club this, I club that, I go to Club C, or I club this, you know, whatever. But I never was. I did club, lots of places I liked, but I generally, when I was young, I used to prefer the first part of the evening, which is the pub bit, rather than the club bit. I used to like the sitting around, having a drinky, having a little bit of a chat. And that was a lot more Julia than the juggling and everything. If anything, I dance more now in my 50s than I did in my 20s. But I thought about the relationship that we have with pubs, clubs, etc., cafes. And what an odd one it is, but what an intimate one it is as well. I've got this friend, and he used to go to a particular Brighton club, and he slagged the place off continually. Every month, he'd come back and say, how was it? Oh, it was terrible. I don't know why I bother with that place. Oh, it's dreadful. The toilets are filthy. It's not fit for purpose. And then I saw him, and like every month he'd say this, I'm definitely not going back next month. And you guessed it, next month he would come back, and it's, oh, well, I don't know, I'm not going to go back next month because it was crap, it was terrible, it was filthy. It's a dreadful place. And then eventually I saw him once, and he was like very upset, not tearful, but he looked a bit like he'd lost a pet or something. And I said, what's wrong? And he said, they've closed my club. What? It's due for demolition. They've got to lose the site. They're going to look for another site, but I'm not hopeful. I hate the, oh God, how am I going to be without my club? And I thought, well, you slagged it off for years. Every month you went, you said it was the worst bloody club you'd been in, that you weren't going to go again. It was still, oh no, I loved it. Oh my God, Brighton won't be the same without that club. And this is how we are. We have this kind of love-hate relationship often with venues that we go to. I mean, it's a bit like, if you're a fan of Peter Tinniswood, I didn't know you cared. Remember Uncle Mort, the First World War veteran in it, and how much he loved pubs that were miserable, where the owner hated him and everything was bad. He loved them. He enjoyed bad pubs and he dreaded good ones. And I think people often have this kind of relationship with, you know, venues. Now, some time ago, I knew this tea girl who was very into, she used to organise events and things like that, and she's been doing it since the 70s. And she organised a little fetish do. Now, I'll be honest, we weren't close and weren't quite the same mould, although she looked fabulous and she was very, very good generally at her nightlife stuff. It generally went really, really well. But she organised this little fetish do, which was a monthly one, and it kind of wasn't a success. And I think there's a number of reasons why it wasn't. I think the first off was it was too late. It's the kind of venue that would have been tremendously successful in the 90s or even into the early 2000s. But when she started it, at the sort of beginning of the current decade, that kind of event had really run out of steam. And I liked the idea, but it just didn't really gel, and it's a shame. You kind of think, well, why didn't it? But now I can remember I knew a guy, him and his wife used to run a little BDSM group, just a social, friendly BDSM group. And because of it, they would go to various events. They were not great people for that. Like, some people are addicted. I used to know someone who went to virtually every BDSM event, no matter how minor, in the southeast of England, and he was sort of up 3 or 4 nights a week going to these do's in the middle of nowhere. There was one of the Munchies, it's gone now, in West Sussex. I think it might have been Shoreham, and it had a notoriously difficult to get to venue. You know, it was like part of the thing was it was so bloody difficult to get there. They did close it in the end. But there's a friend of mine and his wife, they went over to this event in Brighton, and it's not going currently. Before you think it's, in fact, I'm not surprised it's not going, because I saw him afterwards. And I said, well, what was it like? Was it all right? And he said, it was full of transvestites. Ooh. He said, no, he said, the only ones who weren't off their head on speed were the ones who were off their head on coke. Plus their friend had her handbag dipped in there. So we all went to a bar and went home. It was horrible. Oh, that was the other thing. He said, and as for the toilets, they hadn't been cleaned for a month. People don't think about this. They think, people who never go, think, oh, a spanking party in Brighton. Oh, that must be exotic. They don't think about it. You know, having your handbag dipped or dirty toilets. This happens even with fetish night. But no, this event that didn't really gel. It was a Friday nighter, so it became kind of where people started their weekends, and it kind of was never really sure what it's supposed to be. I think they intended it to be a lot more saucy postcard. I know they weren't totally happy when I turned up with a 3.5-foot schooling whip. It was a bit like, we're not that heavy. But the trouble was, a lot of the people who went there, some people wanted more heavy, some people wanted more light, and you get a lot of people with that scene who are into the clothes and nothing else, which is fine. It's lovely, but the people who want to play, the people who just want to pose, people in DS relationships, well, how do you do that at a party? I mean, years ago, they didn't generally have much to do with the scene, as I remember. DS people live DS lives. It's like they sit around and talk about the television because they're living it. So what's the point, you know? And I can also remember one time towards the end of the place, people having a row about the heating, you know, because I knew they wouldn't put the heating on. It was early in the year, and they were getting very low attendances. That's why the place was dying off. And I know they'd cancelled one because only 9 people had turned up. I mean, these things are not always very well supported, and it's not always the fault of the management, because it's happening to a lot of those kind of events, and of course a lot of other kinds of events. People just don't go out like they used to, and they haven't done for years. I mean, it's been 10 years since the recession, you know. And I thought, well, I know they won't put the heating on, so I'll take the furry jacket. But of course, some people didn't think it was so funny. And one seagirl, I think sadly she's no longer with us, she was so peed off, and I can't believe she got away with it, that there wasn't management or staff looking. She broke one of the light fittings with a bullwhip, which was quite funny, but the place was gone within a few months. It just wasn't making enough money. And people are always like, well, that wouldn't happen. It did happen in Eastbourne, it ran for years, but there were a few times it seemed like a success, but other times it didn't. Now, while I'm on the subject of the rough stuff, and my past with the rough stuff, there's a lot of complaints of like, there isn't a dungeon in Eastbourne. Why hasn't Eastbourne got a commercial dungeon? And people say, well, it wouldn't. Eastbourne's far too conservative. It's not, oh, you know, Eastbourne's boring. Rubbish. This is the first time in over 30 years that Eastbourne has not had a commercial dungeon. At one point, I think we might have had 3 at once. You know, and we've had from a real bargain basement place that some friends of mine used to operate, to one of the really classy ones with a national reputation that ran for decades here. So, no, Eastbourne traditionally has had a lot of that sort of thing going on. It's, you know, older people, and certainly in the past you often found that kinky crowd were an older crowd. It's by the seaside, and it was in the past a bit quiet and discreet. So no, we've in the past, you know, this whole, oh, Eastbourne's too conservative, they're not bright cobblers. We've had some fantastic establishments here, but they are sadly gone, and currently there is no dungeon in Eastbourne, not a working one. And whilst a lot of people might think it's a bit offensive to mention it in the same breath as kinky stuff, but the general LGBT situation is similar. I mean, you get people, they come in and say, oh, it'd be nice to get LGBT life in Eastbourne. You know, it's not Brighton, it's very conservative. They wouldn't have gay things here. We had a huge gay community 20, 30 years ago. Much, much, much bigger than most towns this size had. Because of the hotels. In those days, you had three options. You could cut hair, you could work in a hospital, or you could do catering. We are a town of 1,000 cafes. We have a hotel strip down the end, and we've got the DGH on the edge of town. So we had a massively oversized gay population. And in fact, the real problem with Eastbourne's LGBT community is that it's dwindled. It was a really big community. Now, of course, you didn't have the footprint then, because certainly for men, these were the days of legal but not lawful, you know, between, I think it was 67 and 97. So we were kind of, people weren't as out. But there was a much bigger community back then. You know, this whole, oh, it's Eastbourne, it's too conservative. Absolute rubbish. Absolute rubbish. And of course also we got a load of theatres, you know. Four. Plus sort of little art house things as well. But, you know, the theatre is not unknown for LGBT people working in it. So we were something of an LGBT centre in the past, much bigger than we are now. But we are getting the community back together. Things are beginning to happen again. As you know, we had Pride last year, but it's a different sort of community. Well, we called it the Mardi Gras last year. This year it will actually be called Pride. It's a different sort of community from what historically it was. You know, it's not so... It's a little bit quieter, more sedate, or maybe it's just that I'm now in my 50s and I've reached a stage where perhaps I want a quieter and maybe the more rowdy stuff I did when I was younger, I'm getting a bit old for now. I mean, I find it very hard. I haven't been to a fetish event for about 2 or 3 years, and I can't imagine going back to one now. It's not who I am anymore. I mean, whatever goes on in my own bedroom, I can't imagine I'd go to that kind of party nowadays, or that kind of club. So I like a gentler kind of event. I mean, we had a sing-along at the Drop-In Cafe the other night, and it took me right back to my early days in the old Hartington Arms in the 80s, when we used to have piano sing-along. We used to have rather a nicely, very ornate, rather a nicely veneered upright in the bar, and they used to hire a Strillers only, a piano player, on a Sunday night. They belt out various songs, including old musical songs, which I grew up in. People in England, I don't suppose it's like it now, but even the 60s and 70s, they were like nursery rhymes, musical songs. They were such a part of the culture, this early 20th century musical thing. And people talk about it influenced people like the Kinks and Madness. It's part of the culture. I think actually during the Dardanelles campaign in World War I, they actually, gun positions had the names of musical performers as code words. Music hall was a big British thing. But we used to sing those, various pop songs, lots of American ones from between the wars, and those were a really good night at the old Hartington Arms. At one point, in the 80s, piano bar and sing-along, they used to give you out the lyrics. It was like the main event for the community. It was bigger than having a dance on a Friday or a Saturday, which we only did occasionally then. We didn't usually have the disco as a set-up. That came along later in the 90s. So I'm a little bit conflicted now. I understand I'm older. But I'd still like a good time now and again. I absolutely love the dances that we have at the Cumberland, but we only have a few a year. And I love TLI. TLI is very good, but once in a while I think, yeah, I'd like a little bit of a jugger again. Get on with it, but I'm not sure what kind of a venue you have for someone my age for that kind of thing. I don't know, but it's definitely a very ambivalent relationship. between the regular, the usuals as they used to call them, at a venue and the venue itself, and they may slag it off for years and years and years, and then it's gone. They're like, oh, it happens. Oh.